Imagine if all the Earth's oxygen disappeared. Not forever, just for 5 seconds. Would we just hold our breath and be fine? Would it even matter? Could the world really change that much in just 5 seconds? The answer is yes. Absolutely yes. In fact, 5 seconds without oxygen would be enough to completely reshape our planet and cause catastrophic damage to everything on it, including you. Those 5 seconds would be the most destructive 5 seconds in human history. Take a nice deep breath right now. Feel how satisfying that is. What you're breathing in is oxygen, and it makes up roughly 21% of our atmosphere, with 78% being nitrogen, and the remaining 1% being various other gases like argon and carbon dioxide. Although oxygen isn't the most abundant gas in our atmosphere, it is absolutely the most important. Without oxygen, plants couldn't perform photosynthesis, animals couldn't breathe, water couldn't exist in its current form, and humans, we wouldn't be here at all. Oxygen is woven into the fabric of our planet at every level, from the air we breathe to the ground we walk on. So what would happen if it all vanished for just 5 seconds? Let's find out. Your body, surprisingly fine for now. Let's start with the good news, which is that you probably wouldn't die immediately. 5 seconds is not a long time to hold your breath. Most people can go at least 30 seconds without breathing, and some can hold their breath for several minutes. Your body has enough oxygen stored in your blood and tissues to keep functioning for a short period without fresh air. If the oxygen disappeared right now, you might not even notice at first. Your breathing would continue normally. Your lungs would still expand and contract, pulling in air, except that air would suddenly be missing its most vital component. For 5 seconds, your body would essentially be running on reserves like a car coasting after the engine cuts out. You wouldn't suffocate. You wouldn't pass out. You'd be uncomfortable, maybe confused about why the air suddenly feels wrong, but you'd be physically okay. Your brain, your heart, your organs, they'd all keep functioning normally because they're using the oxygen already in your system. But that's where the good news ends, because while your body would be fine, everything around you would be falling apart in the most spectacular and terrifying ways possible. Concrete collapses. Every building crumbles. The first catastrophe would happen so fast you wouldn't have time to react. Every concrete structure on Earth would instantly collapse into dust. Concrete is everywhere in modern civilization. Buildings, bridges, dams, roads, foundations, parking garages, stadiums, all made primarily from concrete. The Hoover Dam, one of the largest concrete structures in the world, contains enough concrete to pave a highway from San Francisco to New York City. The Pantheon in Rome has stood for nearly 2,000 years because of its massive concrete dome. Skyscrapers around the world rely on concrete for their structural integrity. All of it would crumble instantly. Here's why. Concrete isn't just rocks and cement mixed together. Oxygen acts as a special binding agent in concrete at the molecular level. The chemical bonds that hold concrete together require oxygen. Without oxygen, concrete is just dust and aggregate with nothing binding it into a solid material. The moment oxygen disappeared, every concrete structure would lose its molecular cohesion. The Hoover Dam would collapse into a pile of dust and rubble. The Pantheon's dome would disintegrate. Every concrete building, every bridge, every overpass would simply cease to exist as a solid structure. If you were inside a concrete building at the moment oxygen vanished, you'd have approximately 1 second to realize something was wrong before the building collapsed on top of you. Floors would give way, walls would crumble, ceilings would fall. In major cities with tall concrete buildings, millions of people would be crushed in the collapse. Even after oxygen returned, the damage would be done. You can't uncrumble concrete. Every concrete structure that collapsed would need to be completely rebuilt from scratch. The economic and human cost would be incalculable. Metal fusion. Everything welds together. While concrete was turning to dust, something equally strange and catastrophic would be happening to metal. Any untreated metal surface would instantly fuse to any other untreated metal surface it was touching. Cars would weld to roads, tools would fuse together, metal bridges would weld their joints solid. Machinery would lock up as moving metal parts bonded together. This happens because of something called oxidation. When metal is exposed to oxygen in the air, it forms a thin layer of oxidation on its surface, basically a microscopic layer of rust. This oxidation layer prevents metal surfaces from cold welding to each other. It's why you can stack metal sheets on top of each other without them fusing into a single block. But in a vacuum or in an oxygen-free environment, metal surfaces will naturally weld together through a process called cold welding. The metal atoms at the surface don't know they're part of different objects. They just see other metal atoms and bond together at the molecular level. Remove Earth's oxygen for 5 seconds, and this would happen everywhere simultaneously. Cars parked on metal surfaces would weld to the ground. Metal parts in engines and machinery would fuse together, making them permanently inoperable. Metal tools touching each other would become inseparable. Even coins in your pocket might fuse together if they were pressed against each other when the oxygen vanished. When oxygen returned after 5 seconds, the metal wouldn't spontaneously unweld. The damage would be permanent. Trillions of dollars worth of vehicles, machinery, and equipment would be ruined instantly. The ozone layer vanishes, instant sunburn. If you happened to be outside when the oxygen disappeared, you'd experience something extremely unpleasant. An instant, severe sunburn over every exposed inch of your skin. The ozone layer, Earth's protective shield against the sun's harmful ultraviolet radiation, is made entirely of oxygen. Specifically, it's made of ozone molecules, which are 3 oxygen atoms bonded together. The ozone layer sits in the stratosphere, roughly 15 to 35 kilometers above Earth's surface, absorbing most of the sun's UVB and UVC radiation before it can reach the ground. Without oxygen, there is no ozone layer. Remove the oxygen and you remove our protection from the sun. UV radiation travels at the speed of light, which means the moment the ozone layer disappeared, UV radiation would hit Earth's surface at full strength. If you were standing outside in direct sunlight, your skin would be exposed to radiation levels similar to standing directly in front of an industrial UV lamp. Within those 5 seconds, you'd receive a radiation dose equivalent to hours of intense sun exposure. Your skin would immediately begin to burn. Fair-skinned people would get severe sunburns across all exposed skin. Darker-skinned people would fare slightly better but would still experience significant UV damage. Your eyes, if you were looking toward the sky, would be hit with UV radiation that could cause temporary or even permanent vision damage. And this is just 5 seconds. If the oxygen stayed gone for even a minute, the UV exposure would be enough to cause serious radiation burns and potential DNA damage leading to skin cancer. 5 seconds is bad. Longer would be catastrophic. Your ears explode. The pressure drop. While your skin was burning from UV radiation, something even more painful would be happening to your inner ears. They'd explode. Losing oxygen doesn't just mean losing breathable air. It means losing 21% of the atmosphere, 21% of the air pressure that's currently pressing against your body from all directions would suddenly disappear. Under normal conditions at sea level, atmospheric pressure is about 100 kilopascals or 14.7 pounds per square inch. Your body is adapted to this pressure. Your ears, specifically, have a delicate mechanism for equalizing pressure between the inside and outside of your eardrum. If you suddenly lost 21% of atmospheric pressure, it would be equivalent to instantly teleporting from sea level to an altitude of about 2,000 meters, roughly the elevation of a city like Denver, but reached instantly instead of gradually. Your ears wouldn't have time to adapt. The air pressure inside your inner ear would suddenly be much higher than the pressure outside. Your eardrums would bulge outward. In many cases, they'd rupture outright, causing immediate excruciating pain and hearing loss. You'd feel like someone had just stabbed ice picks into both ears simultaneously. There'd be a popping sensation, followed by intense pain, possibly bleeding from your ears, and a persistent ringing or complete silence depending on how badly your eardrums ruptured. Even after oxygen returned and air pressure normalized, the damage would be done. Ruptured eardrums can heal, but it takes weeks and often results in permanent hearing damage. Millions of people around the world, would be left partially or completely deaf from those 5 seconds. Combustion stops, vehicles fail, planes fall. While all of this was happening, every combustion engine on Earth would suddenly stop working. Cars would coast to a halt, trucks would stop mid-delivery, and most terrifyingly, airplanes would fall from the sky. Fire requires 3 things: fuel, heat, and oxygen. Remove any one of those and fire cannot exist. Combustion engines, the kind in cars, trucks, motorcycles, lawnmowers, generators, and most airplanes, work by burning fuel in the presence of oxygen. No oxygen means no combustion. No combustion means no power. The moment oxygen disappeared, every combustion engine would sputter and die. Cars on highways would suddenly lose power. Drivers would feel their vehicles coasting, engines dead, brakes still working but no acceleration. Within seconds, highways would become parking lots, filled with confused drivers, wondering why their cars stopped. Trucks carrying goods across continents would stop wherever they were. Delivery vehicles would coast to the shoulder. Emergency vehicles responding to calls would suddenly be unable to continue. Generators providing backup power to hospitals and critical infrastructure would cut out. But the real catastrophe would be in the sky. There are, on average, about 100,000 flights in the air at any given moment around the world. Most of these are commercial jets carrying passengers. These jets are powered by turbine engines that burn jet fuel in compressed air. Without oxygen, these engines would flame out instantly. For 5 seconds, every airplane in the sky would become a glider. Pilots would experience what's called a total engine failure, every engine cutting out simultaneously with no warning. Alarms would sound in the cockpit. Passengers would feel the sudden silence as the engine noise disappeared, replaced by the whistle of wind over the fuselage. 5 seconds isn't long enough for a plane to fall very far. At typical cruising speed, a passenger jet would drop maybe 50 to 100 meters in 5 seconds. When oxygen returned, engines could potentially restart if the pilots reacted quickly enough and if the engines hadn't been damaged by the sudden cutoff. But many wouldn't restart in time. Some planes would lose too much altitude. Others would be at critical phases of flight, landing, or takeoff, where even 5 seconds of lost power would be catastrophic. Planes would crash. Thousands would die. The aviation industry would be devastated. And remember, this isn't just commercial jets. Private planes, helicopters, military aircraft, cargo planes, all of them would experience the same engine failure simultaneously. The sky goes dark. Light disappears. While vehicles were failing and planes were falling, you'd notice something strange about the sky. It would go completely dark, even in the middle of the day. The sky appears blue because of a phenomenon called Rayleigh scattering. Sunlight, which contains all colors of the spectrum, hits molecules in the atmosphere, primarily nitrogen and oxygen. These molecules scatter the light, with blue wavelengths being scattered more than other colors because they're shorter. This scattered blue light is what makes the sky appear blue during the day. At sunrise and sunset, when sunlight has to travel through more atmosphere to reach your eyes, even more scattering occurs, and the longer red and orange wavelengths dominate, creating beautiful, colorful skies. But all of this requires molecules in the atmosphere to scatter the light. Remove 21% of the atmosphere's molecules, specifically remove all the oxygen, and there are suddenly far fewer things for light to bounce off of. The sky would darken dramatically. Not to complete blackness, because nitrogen and other gases would still provide some scattering, but the vibrant blue would vanish. The sky would appear a much darker, almost grayish or purplish color. In some areas, especially at higher altitudes where the atmosphere is already thinner, the sky might appear nearly black, like the sky looks from space. The sun would still be visible, but it would look different, harsher, more like a brilliant point of light, rather than the diffuse glow we're used to. Stars might become visible during daytime in some locations where the sky darkened enough. When oxygen returned after 5 seconds, the sky would brighten again, but the sudden change would be disorienting. People would wonder if they just experienced some kind of supernatural event or if something was wrong with their eyes. The Earth's crust crumbles. Everything falls. And now we come to the worst part, the catastrophe that would end all others. The Earth's crust would begin to crumble. The Earth's crust, the solid ground you're standing on right now, is made up of approximately 45% oxygen by mass. That's right, almost half of the rocks, soil, and minerals that make up the Earth's surface are oxygen atoms bonded to other elements like silicon, aluminum, iron, and calcium. Remove the oxygen and those chemical bonds break. The crust would lose its structural integrity. Rocks would crumble into their component elements. Soil would fall apart. Mountains would collapse. The entire surface of the Earth would begin to disintegrate. This wouldn't happen instantly. Chemical bonds don't break at the speed of light, but it would happen fast enough that within those 5 seconds, you'd feel the ground beginning to shift beneath your feet. Cracks would appear. The ground would rumble and shake. In some areas, the surface would simply give way, creating sinkholes and chasms. If oxygen stayed gone for more than 5 seconds, the destruction would accelerate. The crust would continue crumbling until nothing remained but a cloud of dust and separated elements. Everything on the surface, cities, forests, oceans, people, would fall into the collapsing crust, tumbling into an ever-deepening abyss. But even with oxygen returning after just 5 seconds, the damage would be severe. Any areas where the crust had begun to crumble wouldn't magically repair themselves. There would be massive sinkholes, collapsed ground, and structural damage to the planet's surface that would take millennia to naturally repair, if it ever could. Conclusion: 5 seconds is more than enough. So what would happen if the world lost oxygen for just 5 seconds? Nearly everything would break, and many people would die. Concrete structures would collapse, killing millions. Metal would fuse together, destroying trillions of dollars of equipment. Everyone outside would get severe sunburns from unfiltered UV radiation. People's eardrums would rupture from the sudden pressure change. All combustion engines would stop, stranding vehicles and causing planes to crash. The sky would go dark, and the Earth's crust would begin to crumble beneath our feet. 5 seconds doesn't sound like a long time, but when it comes to oxygen, 5 seconds is more than enough to end civilization as we know it. The good news is that oxygen isn't going anywhere. It's been a part of our atmosphere for billions of years, and will continue to be here for billions more. Oxygen is constantly being produced by plants and phytoplankton through photosynthesis and is remarkably stable in our atmosphere. But this thought experiment does remind us of something important. We take oxygen for granted. It's always there, invisible, odorless, silently keeping us alive and holding our world together. Without it, everything falls apart, literally. So take another deep breath, appreciate that 21% of oxygen in the air, and be grateful that it's not going anywhere anytime soon. If you enjoyed this exploration of what would happen without oxygen for just 5 seconds, subscribe for more scenarios that make you appreciate the invisible things that keep us alive. And maybe leave a comment about which disaster would be worst: the collapsing buildings, the falling planes, or the crumbling Earth itself. Stay breathing out there.